I really welcome the opportunity to discuss this initiative today. Children were so badly affected by COVID and by lockdowns. Schools were closed, sports stopped, music, art, drama, all gone. Rites of passage like communions and confirmations and graduations and debs and even birthday parties were put on pause. Children were kept apart from one another, and they were kept apart from their families, their aunties, their uncles, their grandparents. In the very early days, children were even labelled as super spreaders, and they were excluded from public places. These measures were of course necessary to protect children, protect families, and to protect the vulnerable in our communities, but that didn't make it any easier. And as we prepare to get back to normal life, let's work together to make it a better normal for children. It's often remarked that children are remarkably resilient. But truth be told, the last 18 months has been really difficult on all of us, and that includes children. And as we begin to emerge from the pandemic, it's really important that we learn lessons and that we don't return to all of the ways of the past. That instead, we look and see how we can improve on children and how they're educated, on how they're cared for, and how they're supported in Irish society. A better normal, as the Ombudsman for Children says, is what we need to strive to achieve. This is his initiative that's seeking the commitment of government to prioritise children as we plan for a life post-COVID. COVID has exposed so many inequalities amongst children and young people, and the particular disadvantage that children from certain backgrounds face, children from all walks of life face. This initiative sets out two issues that we simply must address: child poverty and child homelessness. There was a really heartbreaking statistic in the Ombudsman's report, and it's been quoted here already today. Of the 40,000 babies born since the start of the pandemic, 8,000 of them will have left maternity hospitals to spend their first night in marginalised, disadvantaged, or in other cases, homelessness. I had to read that statistic about 4 times before I believed it, because it is just so harrowing to see it in black and white and to see that we as a society are living that. But we've also made good, and we've made good on promises, and we've made good on progresses, and it's really important to acknowledge that too. Family homelessness is at its lowest level in 5 years. This year, there were almost 2,000 fewer children living in emergency accommodation than in previous years. Now, one child living in emergency accommodation is one child too many, but at least it's progress. And today, Minister O'Gorman announced the appointment of an independent group to track progress on ending direct provision, a living situation we know negatively impacts some of the most vulnerable children amongst us. One child living in poverty is one too many, and there is a lot more that still needs to be done to address this issue. We know that poverty during childhood is linked to poorer outcomes in many other key developmental areas: educational attainment, school engagement, social and emotional development, overall health, quality of life. And I believe that our schools offer a great pathway for supporting young people living in poverty and lifting them out of poverty. I think targeting services in our schools so that those who are most at risk of slipping below the poverty line can be identified, can be helped first, and can be supported is such a welcome suggestion on the part of the Ombudsman for Children, and is happening in schools right across the country and in my constituency. We know that food poverty in itself is a huge issue amongst children. Today, global issues are gathering in the UN for the Food Systems Summit to discuss this very issue. And they were talking about how we move to a more sustainable model of food production globally, because food poverty among children is both a global and a national issue. Here in Ireland, last year, the Irish Youth Foundation reported that 100,000 children were going to bed hungry every night. Greater investment and expansion of free school dinners, hot meals programmes and breakfast clubs could ensure that every child is guaranteed at least one nutritious, substantial meal a day. And I welcome the progress that's happening with these schemes. It's a factor which is often highlighted as improving school performance as well as physical health. The current back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance is a lifeline for many families in my constituency, and I would welcome further expansion of this to help families with the additional costs and with inflation. I also think it's really important that a policy successor to Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, the government's national policy framework for children and young people, which led us from 2014 to 2020, is decided on soon. We need a new plan for the current times. We need to endeavour to give the young people of Ireland a better normal.